CardGamesTV1 Podcast. Is the game hard? Is any card game hard? But Dragon Ball Super specifically, is it hard? Is it difficult? Is it a lot like chess, right? Or is it more like tic-tac-toe or rocks, paper, scissors, right? Actually, definitely a lot like rocks, paper, scissors, because of the fact that in order, I attack, right? Double strike. Think of double strike like a scissor, right? So I put out scissors, right? Double strike to go for game. But my opponent has some options. They could block, they could negate, or they can out combo, right? So since we know rock beats scissor, then all you really need is something that represents that, which would be either block, negate, or use your hand size to stop the attack, right? Out combo, right? So, essentially it's just a basic rocks, paper, scissors type of situation. It's not that complicated. But a lot of people like to make the game complicated. A lot of people like to talk about the game as if it is complicated, as if it's difficult. That's why when someone like myself would point out that the game is actually really easy, really simple, really basic, it's not complicated at all, there will be people who will disagree. There'll be people who will try to make the game sound more complicated than it really is, and they'll even try to advise you on how to deal with the complexity, when in reality the game is not that complicated for that advice. That advice is based off of something that's false, right? It's based off of a lie. So you have to think, okay, so if the game is simple, right? Because if I'm claiming the game is simple, what makes it simple? What is it about the game that makes it more a rocks, paper, scissors type of game than it would be chess, right? And the reason is part of it is human behavior, right? Just not too long ago, what was it this weekend? Yeah, it was this weekend. Yeah, this Sunday. Yeah, I went and I played at a local. And still, same thing happens, right? Still, the first 4 damage is the easiest. And that's the thing, proof of concept, right? When I say the first 4 damage is the easiest, next 2 requires a little effort, and the last 2 is the hardest, is because literally that's what happens when I play. That's my mindset. That's my focus. That's what I focus on, making sure I do consistently every time I play, is deal the first 4 damage with very little effort. The next 2, put a little effort into it. Gotta get some damage through, right? And then the last 2, tends to be the hardest. From me playing, I've been able to get my opponent down to 1, right? Relatively easy, so it's not much effort to get them down to 1. But to finish off the game, that's where you need a strategy, right? Some way to make sure you can finish off the game, late game, because as many times I said before in other podcasts and videos, was the fact that after turn 2, so once you have 3 or more energy, whoever has 3 or more energy is irrelevant, but once you are 3 or more energy, which means you're mid-game, once you get to mid-game, then it gets harder to do damage. And then when you get to late game, it's definitely harder to do damage. Not impossible, obviously, because the game is not that complicated, but it's harder. Because by that time, hand sizes has drastically increased, right? Through leader swings, through unison effects, through other card effects, right? Through battle card drawing. If you play super combos, you drew, right? Especially if you have a leader that when you super combo, you draw. So like that kind of stuff. Because most of my opponents, they had half their deck in their hand. I went up against the U7 Goku leader deck, and that was bursting like crazy. And so his deck was very, very, very low, and his hand size was relatively big. And I played against the Vegeta and Trunks leader, yellow leader deck. don't know what it's called exactly. It's just, I know the leader is Trunks and Vegeta on the leader, and that definitely draws a lot. And ironically, that was my round 1 opponent, and he's the same opponent I had the last time I played at that local. So it was just ironic that I played the same person in the first round. And we were playing the same deck. He was playing his yellow Trunks and Vegeta deck. I was using my Zamasu deck. Of course, we modified our deck, so he upgraded his deck, upgraded mine. So we were playing different builds than the last time. I won the last time. I haven't uploaded that video of the gameplay, but I won that one. And this time he won this time. I was close, obviously, very, very close to winning, but he ended up winning. So that was good for him, because he definitely was, remembering the last game, last time we played, and definitely trying to put that experience to work, which is how you do it, right? Even though a lot of our strategies, a lot of our decks, a lot of what we were doing, pretty much, basic, right? We were doing the same shit we were doing the last time, right? My strategy is the same as it was last time. I'm just using different cards to try to speed up and try to ramp up to it. But so what was I saying? So he definitely did better. I was trying to ramp up to my 7 drop. Enter 17 turn ties, obviously. And the only slight difference is the fact, my game plan is slightly different because of the fact that I, instead of try to take my opponent down from 3 life to 0, I'm trying to take them down from 4 to 0. So that's what I'm doing differently. That's how I'm using Android 17 turn ties. Because typically you try to get your opponent down to 2 life or 1 life and then try to finish them off with turning ties, right? But I'm trying to do it when my opponent has more life. So when my opponent has 4 or 5 life, I'm trying to, end them out. But it's all about trying to get Android 17 turning tides out for the strategy, obviously. I am considering using Man on a Mission as part of the strategy, because I could drop it for free, and that's a 20k double strike, or double strike crit, I should say. So that's very useful. And then drop 17 turn tides. That way my opponent's hands clear, obviously, and then I'll be able to 30k crit, and then 20k double strike crit. So that's 3 damage right there, and my opponent doesn't get no cards out of that. And if they still have life, they still have 1 life left afterwards, then I can swing with a leader or a unison and finish them off. Or if they have 5 life, right, and I have a unison and a leader, then after I do the 3 damage in crit damage, then I can go unison, then leader, depending on which one's stronger. If the unison is like a 20k, then I'll swing with the leader first, and then swing with and then the last attack would be the unison, just in case my opponent just manages to get some combo power, like at least 5k combo power. I want the 20k to matter. If they draw a super combo, then good for them, right? They're able to out combo a 20k swing. But if they don't and they get a 5k combo power, then the 20k will go through. So that's the kind of things you gotta think about. So that'll be the game plan, right? That'll be the strategy that I'll be trying to use more later on. So what was that? Oh, like I said, the game is not that complicated, especially if you plan ahead, right? If you plan out how you're going to win, you have a strategy, then it's just a matter of pulling it off. I lost a couple of my matches. It wasn't like, I wasn't getting too old or anything. It was just the fact that it's like, I win the game, I lose the game, and the game was very close, but I lost. And then, we get to the third match, game very close, You know, I just need one more turn and I'll go and I'll be able to finish off the game, and then I don't. Something happens, right? I got to see the Vegeta SCR in action, so that was nice to see it in action. I was literally one turn away from winning, but my opponent used their Vegeta effect to essentially crit my my life, and I only had 1 life. Because if I'm right, I had 2 life, and I used the what's it called, the Chills Army Reinforcement or something. So I took a life in order to play it for free to negate an attack and put up a token blocker, right? Which put me down to 1 life. So I went from 2 life to 1. But of course, he can't deal me, you know, battle damage or effect damage. But an effect that sends my life to the drop or any other area or warps it would obviously still apply. So I would lose the life in those conditions. So it turns out that the Vegeta does have the ability to send a life and clear your board at the same time. And it kills unisons too, which I like. So he was able to use it. What was a little bit odd though, didn't point out, but it didn't make a big deal because I was just having fun, and it's like, hey, you got it, you got it, right? I'm not gonna be specific and be like, oh no, but he did this, that, and the third, and said this, that. Well, the thing is that I'm just stated is this was the second time that he stated that he's going to use his active main at the end of his turn. So he be like, all right, at the end of my turn, I remove this card from the game, and he tells me the effect, right? So that doesn't sound right, because it's like, well, if it's an active main, then it means you do it during your main phase, right? You don't do it at the end of your turn. So it's not an end turn effect, so why are you stating it like it is? So that seems a little off. Plus, it definitely seemed like he didn't know how to play the deck that well. It probably was like, you know, the first time he was actually using the deck, so but anyway, that right there further proven is like, this game is not complicated. Even somebody with very little experience, you know, very little practice with a deck or cards wouldn't, you know, can still win, right? You know, because like I said, it's not rocket science. This game is not like chess. It's not complicated. You don't have to be a grand master. Even though what's ironic, I have a master class series, right, of videos, but that's just to share my, you know, insights and my viewpoints on certain aspects of the game, like me mastering the basics of the game, right? Like me figuring out, all right, this game functions this way. This is how, you know, this turn 1 functions. This is how turn 2 functions. You know, I'm breaking it down, you know, scientifically, essentially. But all I'm really showcasing is how simple the game is, that it's not that complicated. The first 4 damage is the easiest because you have a leader, and you're always swinging with the leader, and your opponent takes the damage. And every time, I went up against, so one of my matches was against Shenron deck, the, you know, yellow Shenron, Sin Shenron deck, and every time I attacked, he'd be like, okay, I take it. Okay, I take it. And that just kept going over and over. Just for humor purposes, want to point out that the whole time I'm like, am I playing against Evan U7? Because he so looked like Evan U7. Looked like it could be his little brother or something. So that was funny. I was thinking like, man, it feels like I'm playing against Evan U7. So shouts out to Evan. So that was kind of funny. I was like, I wish I could record this because it'd be funny. And that's another ironic thing. Before the tournament started, there was a new rule: no recording. That was ironic. But anyway, point is, so I'm playing, and I noticed he just kept saying okay. Like he didn't try to stop the attacks, even though he could. And it's like the way his deck functions, you know, obviously I play Shenron, so I know how it functions. I'm like, you want to combo, you can combo. Save your life. Why are you taking the damage for? It's not that deep. You're already drawing a lot of cards. You already have a lot of stuff in your drop, so you don't need to take damage, right? But anyway, whatever, to each their own. It's just that I noticed he would, and just like sometimes he'll attack, and the attack would be like, he'll attack my unison. That happened one time. He attacked my unison, and then he comboed. he comboed up to like 50k or something, or more than that. Like he comboed a lot. I think it was 55. I think it was 55k. He combos up to 55k on a 20k unison. I'm like, that wasn't even that deep. I'm like, you are aware that I can't combo against you, so there's no point in comboing. But if you think about it logically, it's like, okay, I get it. You're just trying to fill up your drop. But at the same time, it just seemed weird. It's like, you could have comboed defensively. You could have comboed any other time. But you choose to do it right now just to fill up your drop. And it's like, okay, whatever. Like, the funny thing is, he could have just attacked my leader and comboed if he just really wanted to fill up his drop and then deal me damage in the process. It was just weird to just go for my unison, combo unnecessary amount of cards. What was the purpose, right? But whatever, you know, whatever works, right? To each their own. But it was just an interesting thing that I noticed. I'm like, this doesn't seem right. He's doing things that, you know, you typically wouldn't expect people to do. But that's part of why I respected it, why I loved about it. Further proving that it's like, even though the game is simple and whatnot, you can play the game in such a way that causes things to be different. Oh, this also reminds me, right now, just popped into my head, there was somebody who's commenting on my videos. Wouldn't be surprised they end up commenting on this one. Commenting on one of my videos about, you know, me, you know, super combos and stuff like that, obviously. And of course, me explaining the usual, where it's like, you know, why I don't use them a lot. I do use them from time to time, just not a lot. And this person just started talking about, you know, like, I must be playing a different game than they are and blah, blah, blah. It's like, which I should, after this, check the comments, see if they responded. But, you know, just the idea of like playing the game differently or just playing a totally different game, right? It's like, yes, it is true. I do play the game differently than you because you are trying to make the game out to be something that's not. You're trying to play the game like it's chess. I'm playing the game like it's rock, paper, scissors, right? And it's all about just making sure you have what you need to win and win, right? If your opponent puts out scissors, you put out rock and you win, right? That kind of stuff. So you just need to make sure that you choose correctly, right? Make decisions that lead to your victory, right? And do your best, right? Sometimes, even though you have a really good plan and it's like, okay, everything's working according to plan, I just got to make it to the next turn and I'll win. I'm going to win. And then you don't. That can happen. That can happen to anybody. It can happen to the best of us, right? So even if you are just one turn away from winning, you're guaranteed to win the next turn. If you don't get to that turn, well, you're not going to win. That's just the way of life. Which is unfortunate sometimes, right? Some people might hate that, especially when it comes to real life, right? Where it's like, man, I did all this, I worked, I saved money, I did this, that, and third. You know, I did things right to, you know, get the outcome in life I want, and then suddenly you don't get the outcome you want. Things don't work out. You know, that can happen, right? And part of it is because you're dealing with other people. Sometimes people forget that when you're playing this game, you're playing against other people. So yes, other people make the game complicated, but the game itself is not complicated. So I'm not trying to say that when you're playing the game with an opponent, there's not a certain level of complexity. There is a level of complexity, but that's because it's created by your actions and your opponent's actions that adds that level of complexity, right? Which is part of what makes it fun, because you never know, right? You never know. Even though, you know, let's say you drop baby hat check on your opponent's turn, it's like, yeah, I'm guaranteed in the next turn, you know, another turn, and somehow your opponent catastrophic blows you for game or something, right? So, you know, or something, right? Or you do get the extra turn, but they're able to prevent you from winning, and then they win on the following turn. Like, that could happen, right? So that's why it's very important to try to reduce those possibilities, right? Reduce the possibility of your opponent getting an extra turn. That's why you want to add extra layers to your strategy. Let's say you rely on topo to get you an extra turn, right? Well, if your opponent has a huge hand size, that's what she said, right? The likelihood of them pushing through your topo effect is pretty high if they have a huge hand size. So against some decks, Topo, yeah, it's going to get you that extra turn, but not against every deck. You're going to get the extra turn with Topo. Same goes for Violent Rays, because even one of my opponents, yeah, it was the Goku U7 player. He used 4 Violent Rays, but I didn't have a wide board. I didn't have a whole bunch of attackers for him to really use the effect, and he did use the discarded card effect to prevent me from attacking with battle cards. But the funny thing is, all I was doing was playing my Unison, swinging with my Unisons, and then replacing it and playing another Unison and swinging with that. So I was just focusing on just swinging with Unisons. And they were 20k, so he would have been better off using the effect to prevent my Unison swings, which were the actual threat. Hopefully he learned from our match that you should use the effect on the Unisons instead of trying to use it against battle cards. Since I, obviously play more Unisons and swing with Unisons and leader more than I do with battle cards. Because the whole idea is for me to ramp to Android 17 turn tides, so I'm not playing that many battle cards to battle with. My main attackers is my leader and Unisons. So hopefully he figures that out. But that's the point. It's like he kept, he was using it, right? It's like he used it, he pitched the card, he used it, he pitched the card. It's like, yeah, it wasn't necessary to pitch unless you're going to use, state Unison. But he kept picking battle cards, so that was a waste. So he was pitching for nothing. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's, you want to make sure that when you use cards, you use them properly, right? So that way you can get the most out of them. But as the idea of like a backup is like, yeah, you might have Topo, you might have Violent Rays or Flying Nimbus, but you want to make sure you have at least an extra type of negate. Like, for example, the blocker negates. You take a live negate an attack, or even a sparking negate, like a Dimension Magic or something. You might want to back up your Floodgate negate with a free negate. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's a little pro tip right there for you. You want to do that. Just like if you drop Oceanus, it's good that she already is a blocker, so that already gives you the ability to stop one attack. I mean, other than the first attack she stops, obviously, because she's a counter attack. But at least you still have the ability to potentially stop another attack if your opponent tries to go, tries to play through Oceanus's ability. But then you still want to have like the blocker negate or a floodgate negate afterwards, because imagine dropping Oceanus and then dropping Topo, right? That drastically increases the chances of your opponent deciding not to attack. Especially if they can't guarantee they can end you out that turn. They're more likely like, nah, I'd rather save my hand. I'm not going to take a risk of attacking and losing cards for Topo's effect, as an example. So little things like that you want to take into consideration. Most people already would know that because, if you played enough times, you would have been in scenarios where you noticed that was necessary. It was necessary for you to back up Topo or anything similar to that with a blocker, like a Unison blocker, or a negate, floodgate negate, or even just like something, even like super combos, right? Super combo, maybe a rival play or something, do some type of rival play, just some extra backup, just extra layers of defense. So that's the kind of stuff I try to do. Like I'll put up a Unison blocker, and then after that, try to use my negates, right? My floodgate negates if I have any, and try to accompany it with the Unison blocker, so that way I drastically increase my chances of surviving my opponent's turn. Of course, incorporate board wipes into the deck, so that way I can defend against a whole bunch of attacks, but it means nothing if my opponent still has those attackers, right? So you gotta get rid of them when you can, so make sure you have some board wipes. So you try to incorporate these types of things, because you're going to need it. Like I said, the game is simple, so at some point your opponent's going to play a whole bunch of battle cards, so you're going to need a board wipe. Your opponent's going to play a whole bunch of, or you're going to probably play some big battle cards, and probably going to cheat them out, so you're going to need cards to deal with that. They're more likely going to have stuff that has barrier, so you're going to need some barrier hate, and the list goes on and on. Once you realize, what's the most common things, the stuff that people like using, stuff that has dual attack. That's why floodgate negates are way more important than a regular negate, because of the fact that a regular negate is useless against something they can attack more than once, which is why I was promoting the whole, idea of using dual attacks you know, in one of my master class long time ago, and promoting the idea that's like, yeah, you gotta put more 30Ks into your deck, more double strike, right? Because damage output is important, and more, you know, dual attack, triple attacks, you know, stuff like that. Try to incorporate them into your decks and try to make them cost effective, make it where they cost less. Instead of, you don't want to pay 5 energy for a 5-drop 30K triple attack, even though that sounds good, right? 30K and it attacks 3 times, that sounds good and all, but use the 5 energy to do that, which more likely means you'll be tapped out, which could be a problem. You ideally rather pay 3 energy at most to get that type of power. That way you at least have 2 energy left for like an Oceanus or a Topo or something, or a Floodgate negate and a, you know, regular negate, something like that, right? Using battle cards that negates, that's obviously makes the game simpler, right? They exist, might as well get, you know, make use of them. Because if you're going to play something that negates just 1 attack, it's better off for it to be a battle card, because it's going to have combo power. Plus, if it has the ability to hit the field, it could potentially be an attacker. So you can negate an attack, put a body on board that you could potentially use it to out-combo an attack with, or you can use it as an attacker. So you get a lot more value out of a battle card negate than a regular negate. But the reason you will use like extra card negates will be for A, the negate's free, and B, it's a floodgate negate. Those are the only real reasons you will use negates that are extra cards. Because, you know, if your negate is just a regular negate, right, it negates 1 attack and that's all it does, you're better off just using a battle card negate instead, like a Videl or something, heroic dual Videl or something like that. So these are the kind of stuff that I consider and think about when, you know, I play the game. But like I was saying, was the fact that you need to understand this, like, the game ain't complicated. The whole idea is to try to make the game less complicated, not more complicated, which is why it's annoying when I be hearing people out there trying to make the game sound more complicated than it really is. And then because they make the game sound complicated, then they try to make themselves sound smart, because they'll start saying things and start talking about ratios. Like, they'll try to make the game sound like chess and then make themselves sound like a chess master, like a chess grandmaster. And it's like, why you do all that? The game is not that type of level. It's not at that level. It's not the level of chess. You know, this game is cool, fun, exciting, you know, when you play, because it is really fun to play, you know, some of your favorite characters. You know, that's one of the appeal to this card game is the intellectual property, right? So the franchise is what makes it really, really interesting. But any other card game, I mean, any other franchise could use the mechanics and the layout of this game. I mean, most other games do. Duel Masters was doing this stuff before, you know, Dragon Ball Super was made. Force of Will was kind of doing it with the whole, you know, you start off with like a leader and then you flip the leader over. But of course, Magic was already, you know, doing the whole commander thing. So you already start off with somebody with a character you can play. I mean, if you could afford it, obviously, you have to pay to play it, so you don't automatically start with it. But you get the idea. The whole combo system, you know, comboing from your hand to try to prevent damage, that's from Cardfight Vanguard. So there's like so many things from other games that this game incorporates. Unisons, that's essentially a planeswalker, right? So the game is not that complicated, because it takes a lot of the, you know, fun and useful and, you know, basic stuff from other card games and incorporates into this game, so that way it'd be easier to play, right? And it's supposed to be easy. That way kids can play it, right? Even though this game is largely played by adults, kids can play it. You know what I mean? But like I said, the game is not complicated, but it is always annoying to see people trying to make the game complicated. So much so just that they give advice, and the advice they give tends to be, well, you gotta buy these expensive cards if you want to do good at the game. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't need expensive cards. Yes, you need cards to play the game. I agree. You do pay to play the game, but not to win. So many people got this pay-to-win mindset that they get from like video games and shit like that. But it's like, that doesn't really apply when it comes to card games. You can think it does, but it actually doesn't. That's where the whole net decking thing becomes an issue, because it's like, You think copying somebody's deck is going to give you the same results as that person? No, it is not. I've seen some people play some of my strategies, or at least literally play some of my decks, and they played it totally different than the way I played. So the results tend to vary based off of the player, which is further what I'm stating, that the game is simple if you understand it is simple. But if you think the game is complicated, then the game will be complicated because you're the one who's complicating it. Some people aren't that good at making decisions. Some people are not that good at predictive analysis, right? Pretty much just predicting what their opponent might do, preparing ahead of time. That's why like some people will be caught off guard, and once their opponent gets to a certain turn, then they get surprised when their opponent plays something. It's like your opponent's playing blue and they got 7 energy. You didn't think that they might have Android 17 turn tides? You might want to consider that they do. Not saying that they have to. I've played, obviously some decks without 17 turn tides, and I've had some people tell me like, "Wait, where's your 17? Why didn't you didn't draw it?" I'm like, "I don't play it." Okay, where's your superpowers? I don't play that either. At that time. So at that time, it was just funny for someone to complain that I wasn't playing what they expected me to play. It's like, well, it's good that you expected it, so you were prepared for it, but the fact that I wasn't playing it means you were prepared for nothing, which means you're not focused on what I'm actually doing, and you're focusing on stuff I'm not actually doing. So that's why when I drop my 10 drop Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta Frenzy Burst and activates the effect when I have 16 energy, 15 energy, 15 energy, and then be like, all right, send up to 4 cards from your life to the bottom of your deck. Bang, burn you for game, right? That will surprise you because you were expecting a simpler strategy, a strategy that didn't require a lot of setup. You expected something as simple as turning the tides. But surprise, I was doing something harder. And I succeeded in doing it. And that was the point, right? Just like, played Mirror, create absorb right swing. Your opponent doesn't negate, then, Champa, drop your hand into the attack. Your attack is like over 20k double strike, bang, game, right? Like, that's simple. Everybody knows that. If you've been playing the game long enough, you know that stuff. So the game is not that complicated. It's just most players make it complicated. And that's the point I'm trying to make. The game ain't complicated. It's simple, straightforward. We already have a lot of cards that make the game easy to play, right? Makes it easy to win. And just a lot of people tend to focus on, the wrong things, which makes the game complicated. When some players are focusing on counters, right, the idea of countering, like counter plays and stuff like that, right, then they make the game complicated because they're adding interactions. They're adding something that makes the game more complicated. Cards that let you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, for example, and then add a card to your hand and shuffle your deck and all that stuff, right? Not only does that slow the game down by you doing those steps, by using that type of card, you also, you're creating more randomness, right, when it comes to your deck because you're shuffling it, right? So then you're changing while you're playing the outcome, the possibilities of what you're going to draw, which obviously can have positive results, but it could also have negative results because right now you're complicating things because you're adding randomness to the game, which makes it complicated. I prefer to reduce randomness. That's why I'd rather use, if I'm going to use something that I play to try to get a card, I'd rather play something that draws a card as opposed to something that tries to help me find a card. And what if you don't get a card? That's the other thing, right? You play a card, look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and then people call it whiff, right? And you get nothing. So you get nothing, so you don't add anything to your hand. You committed a card to the board, but you didn't benefit from it. So you didn't plus. Now you have to shuffle your deck. Now your deck is very random, right? More random than it was before you activated the effect, and you didn't get anything. So now that complicated the game for you because you didn't get what you want. What if you wanted to get a super combo and that's all you needed, to help you win the game, but you didn't get it, right? That's why it would be better to have stuff that you could use to help you get to the end result that you want. I'd rather play cards that are either copies of other cards, like they do, kind of the same thing. Like if I can play stuff that kind of acts like a super combo, for example, while still playing super combos in the deck, so that way it's like I have more super combos in my deck, then obviously that's the route I'd rather go than to try to play stuff to try to draw or try to search out my super combos. I'd rather just play stuff that's similar, right? Super combo, pseudo super combo, basically, right? Or like let's say Champa and Supreme Kai. Instead of just playing, a play set of Champa or a play set of Supreme Kai, play both. That way I have 8 cards on my deck that can give me 10k combo power and double strike for just 1 energy, right? And I can play it during the combo step. So that will greatly increase my chances of getting 10k double strike whenever, I need it. And of course I have plenty of copies, so I can charge some of them as energy if I need them for energy. So I'd rather do that because it just guarantees that I have a higher chance of pulling off, double strike damage for game than not, right? Because I'm reducing randomness if I'm increasing the chances of me getting something. So this is why I play multiple copies of like burn cards in a deck, because it depends on the situation. It depends on what I draw. If I go up against hand control, for example, and people are ripping cards out my hand and they're ripping out the burn cards, if I have a lot of burn cards like battle cards or unisons that have the ability to do damage to my opponent, or like catastrophic blow or something like that, right? An extra card that can burn. All I have to do is at least just draw one of those cards that can burn my opponent and then play it and burn for game, right? As an example. And that's if they're ripping a whole bunch of cards out of my hand, right? But if I have less copies of cards that can do something, then the likelihood of me, not being able to use it, right? For example, if I could have more Android 17 Turn of the Tides in my deck, for example, well, that will greatly increase my chances of being able to drop it. Because there'll be times where, like, I have the energy to play Android 17, but I don't have the Android 17. So, I gotta wait until I get it. And that tends to suck sometimes, right? But of course, when you mulligan, you try to mulligan to make sure you try to get Turn of the Tides in your first opening hand. But God forbid, somebody hand, starts doing some hand destruction and gets rid of it. So now you have to hope to draw your extra copies. Gotta hope that they're not in your life. Make sure you didn't, charge any of them into your energy area. Make sure you didn't, mill any, depending on what deck you're playing or what deck you're playing against. Hopefully you didn't mill any. So these types of factors. So certain little things that happen in the game does make the game a little bit more complicated. Like I said, if you go up against hand control, mill strategies, these types of things can complicate the game. If your opponent playing counter plays, can complicate the game for you, right? Which is what your opponent should be doing. They should be making the game harder for you and easier for themselves, and vice versa. You should be making the game harder for your opponent and easy for yourself. You shouldn't be trying to be balanced or fair and try to make it where your opponent has a fighting chance. You want to have the unfair advantage. That's how you're going to get a lot of the W's that you want to get, right? Your goal should be to reduce randomness, right? Reduce the complexity of the game. Don't make the game complicated, is what I'm saying. Be simple and straightforward. Don't try to make the game complicated. And then, go for game, right? Have a game plan to win the game as quickly as possible. That way you win because you chose to win, not because, your opponent locked out because they can out combo your attack or negate or block or counterplay or something like Godsend and Trunks or some shit. You want to avoid those things. Always take into account that you always have your leader. Try to use your leader as a finisher. Most people don't try to use their leader as a finisher. I notice that a lot. Most people don't try to use their leader as a finisher. So So they'll still tap energy to play something like a battle card and try to use the battle card as a finisher, when they should try to consider using their leader as a finisher. At least try to finish the game with your leader, and if your opponent manages to out your attack and not lose to your leader swing, then play a battle card and try to go for game that way, right? So that kind of stuff. But yeah, you really need to, focus on making the game simpler. Part of what makes the game complicated, right? Is the players. The players make the game complicated. So don't make the game complicated for yourself. All right? Don't think the game is complicated, because it's not. You need to learn that the game is simple and understand what makes it simple, right? What makes it easy, right? Not hard. Make it easy and then play that way. This is part of why a lot of times people like spend a lot of money on like expensive cards and stuff like that, because they think that they need to, like, oh man, this game is so complicated, so hard, the meta this, the meta that, so you got to play certain decks and certain cards in order to have a fighting chance. And it's like, no, you don't. You just need to understand the game better, to understand that those things don't make the game balanced or fair or easier or whatever you're trying to convince yourself of. In reality, is like you make the game complicated by complicating the game. Let me see. Everybody is trying to think of something. Like, oh yeah, that reminds me. The Violent Rays. I remember the idea of if somebody that was disagreeing with, I'm not going to drop names, but if somebody was disagreeing with online about Violent Rays and Dark Broly, and pointing out the fact is like, it don't matter if your opponent has Violent Rays. Your opponent drops Violent Rays on you when you're playing Dark Broly. It doesn't auto win, doesn't kill you. Violent Rays doesn't do anything other than give your opponent the ability to survive. Now this person did upgrade. I guess there's a possibility that they took what I said to consideration, even though they didn't publicly make it known, but they more likely realize the idea. There's like, yeah, it is true that Violent Rays doesn't auto win against Dark Broly. It's just, yeah, your opponent plays Violent Rays, you can't end them out, but you can still swing with your leader. And this is before Unisons, by the way. You can still swing with your leader. You can play stuff in your deck that has less than 20k power and deal damage. So I did notice that person did incorporate a couple cards into their decks that let them get under Violent Rays. So they considered, the idea of trying to make sure that Violent Rays isn't a quote-unquote auto win, right? It wasn't a weakness. That's the whole point as a player. It's like, you make the game complicated, not the game itself is complicated. Because one, not everyone plays Violent Rays. I mean, if you're playing red, you probably are playing Violent Rays. But if you're playing blue, you don't have Violent Rays. If you're playing black, you don't have Violent Rays. So the idea of like, oh, Violent Rays is, is auto win for Dark Broly, is an auto lose for Dark Broly. Dark Broly loses to Violent Rays. Like, no. A bad player, or a player that didn't take into account that Violent Rays exist and try to outplay it, or try to play in a way that doesn't cause you to essentially auto lose. Because one, you shouldn't be trying to overextend anyway, or tap out, right, against a red deck if you know Violent Rays exist. I mean, you shouldn't even be trying to tap out if you go against most decks, especially like a yellow deck, because yellow decks have Violent Rays. I mean, not Violent Rays, Flying Nimbus, which is pretty much similar to Violent Rays, right? So if you know these types of cards exist, if you know Floodgate Negates exist, if you know Topo exists, because obviously Topo exists at the time, if Topo exists, you know that you need to prepare for it, that when your opponent does use it, you didn't fall for it, right? You didn't tap out and end up in a bad situation. You made sure you played your cards in order, right? You don't have to play all your battle cards and then start swinging. You could play one battle card, swing. Play another battle card, swing, right? Slowly build your board, right, per each attack. Don't put all your attackers out first, right, all at the same time, and then try to swing, because a violent raid might be there, right, or a flying nimbus or something similar to that, right? You don't want your opponent to try to stop you, right, because you're literally showing them what you're going to do. If you play a whole bunch of attackers, you're taking the choice out of their mind of what to play. They'll be like, oh, he's only attacking with one card. All right, cool. I just use a regular negate. Oh, he played another card. He's attacking with it. You know what? I'll use my floodgate negate against that attack, and then you're like, all right, cool. He did have it. Good thing I didn't overextend and play a whole bunch of attackers and tapped out. All right. But at least you made them burn one negate, one regular negate, and a floodgate negate, and you're not tapped out, so you have a chance of, defending yourself on the following turn, and then try to go for game the following turn after that, right? Patience. Don't be in a hurry to win. Things like that. So like I said, it's like the game's not complicated. Players make things complicated. Just like it's not the company that's making things degenerate or power creep, or the problem in the format is because of certain cards was created and Bandai wanted players to play those cards. Like, no. Bandai creates cards, wants us to play the game and enjoy it, and what we do with the cards and how we play in the metas we as players create, that's on us. So if we have a meta is toxic, right, or degenerate, or whatever you want to call it, that's on us. If the meta is very specific, where like only 3 best decks, all right, that's the community saying that. That's not the reality. The reality is any deck is viable. Any strategy is viable. It's just that there's specific decks that a lot of people feel that is popular. So because of the way they play, the way they think of the game, and because they think the game works a certain way, right? The whole complexity, the game is like chess. So you gotta play decks that can play chess, right? Not realizing that it's like, y'all not playing chess, y'all playing tic-tac-toe. Y'all playing rocks, paper, scissors. But y'all out here acting like y'all playing chess. But okay, teach their own, do you. I'm not telling you not to play that way, right? Play whatever way y'all want. That's on y'all. Just point out that the game isn't complicated, but a lot of players like to make it more complicated than it really is. And then because of that, that's why a lot of times people get surprised when certain decks top, certain decks become meta and whatnot, right? Some people will be like, oh my God, that's so surprising. We expected a lot of set 17 decks to be topping, but for some reason, a lot of set 8 or something, hypothetically, right? A lot of set 8 decks are topping. That don't make no sense. Who could have seen this coming? And then I immediately raised my hand like, well, I did, obviously. Of course, I saw it coming. Like, any deck is viable. Even set 1 decks can top tournaments right now if people actually wanted to top with them. It's not about can you top an event with older decks. It's do you want to, right? Do you want that flex? Do you want to be able to show your old skills, how good you are at the game, that you can take an old deck and top, right? Because it's more about your actions and your decisions than it is about the deck you're playing. But a lot of people out there have this mindset that, it's not the player, it's the deck, it's the format, it's the meta, blah, 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 blah. Like I said, making the game more complicated than it really, really is. This is why I could play non-meta decks and do really well with them, right? Be able to go up against these meta decks and be like, that deck was cool. It did some interesting stuff, but it wasn't that special. Like, not really, in my viewpoint, not really meta worthy. Not something I would recommend. A lot of these decks that I see out there, I wouldn't recommend for somebody to play because they're mid, to my opinion, right? My viewpoint, not really opinion, but my viewpoint from my experience is like, they're pretty mid, they're pretty basic. There's other decks that can do what that deck does and does it better, or at least does it in a different way where it's less complicated, right? Less steps. And that's another thing, steps, right? Why play a deck where you play a 1-drop, the 1-drop becomes a 3-drop, the 3-drop becomes a 5-drop, right? All through these steps, you're taking all these steps to try to get to a 5-drop when there's other decks that can easily drop a 5-drop or a 6-drop for 1 energy or for free, right? If your goal is to go from a 1 drop all the way up to a 30k, battle card, why not just play Dark Broly for 1 energy, warp 6 cards back, you got a 30k ready to roll, right? As an example, or any other deck that could easily drop a 30k. Why waste time, all those steps? So that's the thing, players tend to complicate things. Granted, to each their own, play however way you want. If you like playing the whole chain strategy, right? The whole cell chain or something, right? Just going up and up and up, fine, to each their own. Well, that reminds me, I played against a cell deck. So awesome. Can't wait to get that reminds me, I should order the cards so I can play Perfect Force Cell from under my leader. I need to get the new leader, because I have the old cell leader. Get the new cell leader and get the extra card that lets me play out my Perfect Force Cell. And then, I'll have a cell deck, right? But it was cool to play against this, seeing in action, seeing somebody actually play the extra card and play Perfect Force Cell against me a couple times. Which obviously was relatively useless because my hand size was always so low that it was pointless. Like the last time my opponent used it on me, I only had 4 cards in my hand, so I was like, okay, I'll drop this Unison. I don't need it. I already have my most powerful Unison in play right now, so I don't need this extra copy of the Unison. So I'll drop it and keep 3 cards in my hand that I wanted to keep in my hand. So it's not that big of a deal, right? So that was kind of funny. That my hand size was always so low already that it wasn't that big of a deal that my opponent was playing the, Perfect Force Cell on me. But it was cool to see the card in action anyway. That's the main point. I like the fact that he was playing it out. Because the funny thing is, that was the best trick. That and dropping Cell Zeno. That's the best thing he had. Everything else was trash. He spent more time drawing cards and playing 1-drops and evolving them and stuff like that than he did actually attacking or doing anything of substance. Definitely wasn't ripping my hand like that. My hand was smaller just because I was playing cards. That's the funny thing is, I really didn't have to play anti-hand control, right? Oh, he's playing green, more like he's playing hand control than me. He's playing cell, so let me, draw as many cards as I can. It's no, I didn't have to do anything like that, right? He can't hand control me if you don't have a hand, right? So me just playing out my cards really quick and swinging was more than enough. So that was fun. What else? I guess I talked long enough about the game. It's not complicated, it's simple. The first 4 damage is the easiest, the next 2 requires a little effort, and the last 2 is the hardest. So in reality, you are only really focusing on dealing the last 2 damage. So when you play the game, whatever deck you build, whatever deck you choose to play, whatever, right? The goal is to deal 2 damage. It is not to deal 8, because the first 6 damage are not complicated. It's not rocket science. Any leader, unless it's the leader that can't attack, right? If you have a leader that can't attack, then yeah, the likelihood of you using a leader to do damage is going to be drastically reduced. But you can use a Unison to make up for a leader that can't attack, and then just swing with Unison, swing with some battle card, and try to get your opponent down to 0 life. And that's the end of the podcast.